Welcome everybody. This is my session, 3 ways for getting data from SharePoint using SSIS, Excel, and Access. My name is Dave Patrick. I'm a Microsoft Technical Specialist with DSA. Real quick, a little bit about me. Again, I've got a lot of certifications. I'm a Microsoft Certified Trainer, Certified Professional Developer. I do a lot of SharePoint, been working with it since 2001. MCSE, MCSD, this one's fun, MCP dead. So I'm a Microsoft Certified Professional Developer, Enterprise Application Developer. I swear that someone at Microsoft saw all the exams I was taking and made this one up just so they were punking me. So I go around and I wear that loud and proud. I'm a subject matter expert for the U.S. Army over at Aberdeen Proving Ground. That's my day job. I also teach at a bunch of local colleges, Stevenson University, Towson University, and the University of Maryland at College Park. My day job is a company called DSA. I also run a couple different user groups. The one I'm most proud of is one called madsharepoint.com. We're doing virtual, again, thanks to coronavirus. So feel free to visit the website and attend one of our meetings virtually. Oh, and I'm an MVP. Real quick, a little plug for my company, DSA. Been around since 63, so a long time. They do everything. If anyone's looking, I know the Blackline sounded really, really good. So now I'm thinking, maybe I'll have to check out Blackline. But DSA's out there too, so check us out if you want. All right, what am I looking for from today's session? What are the objectives and what do I want you guys to have when you leave here? What are the takeaways? Number one, I want you to be aware of the SSIS SharePoint source and destination that's available free. I'm a big cheapskate. I like free stuff. So a lot of the things I talk about today, I'm going to tell you how to get them free. If you go out there and you do a Bing search for the SharePoint SSIS, you're going to find a couple of paid solutions, which I'm sure are great. But again, if you're light on the budget, as I am, the ones I'm going to discuss are free. They were open source. They used to be on Codeplex. Now they're on GitHub. I'm going to show you how to use them, and they can connect to real simply get data from SharePoint. There's other ways to get data from SharePoint into your SQL database, OData, and some stuff like that. But this one is, just dead simple. So I'm going to go over that. That's the first takeaway. The second takeaway is other tools to pull data from SharePoint, because sometimes it's just so, if I have a hammer and I'm really good at a hammer, everything looks like a nail, but you kind of have to step back and look at some of these other tools and say to yourself, well, man, if I just need it in Excel, I'm just trying to do a fancy chart, maybe I should use Excel. And gosh, it's right there. I don't know how many people have come up to me and said, well, I'm trying to get this data into a fancy chart in Excel. I need to write some code. No, you don't. We're going to show you how to do that. That's takeaway number 2. Takeaway number 3, Microsoft Access to pull data from SharePoint, run queries against it, and do what I like to call SP CRUD, create, read, update, delete. For all you database professionals out there, I shouldn't have to tell you what, the 4 main database operations. I used to be a SQL DBA for 10 years. I teach database administration and design at Towson University. So I'm always preaching, you need to be able to do a select, an insert, an update, delete, and you can use SharePoint like it's a database. Now, SharePoint uses SQL Server behind the scenes, but the lists that are in SharePoint can be used like relational tables, and you can do CRUD against them. And Access, Microsoft Access. I know people think Microsoft Access, that's just a toy. Let me tell you, in this session, you're going to find out how super powerful Microsoft Access is. Please don't share this with anyone else, because this is my dirty little secret. I put this in my back pocket. I tell my students, we're going to get good at Access. We're going to do all sorts of cool things. We're going to connect to SQL. We're going to connect to SharePoint. We're going to connect to Oracle, all using Microsoft Access without having to write a lot of code. But don't put that on your resume, because Access is not, it's got a bad connotation to it. I'm sorry, Microsoft, it just does. So put down that SQL and Microsoft Access, that'll be our secret little tool we put in the back pocket. So that's the third takeaway, is how great Access is and how we can use it to perform create, read, update, delete against SharePoint. Number 4 is Azure. So I'm going to use Azure in some of my demos. You're going to see me using it to host a SharePoint farm on premises. Wait, what? Azure's cloud, but I'm going to use it to have an on-premises farm in the cloud. That's kind of weird, but we'll talk a little bit about that. And SQL. So you've got SQL for Azure. We'll touch a little bit on that and show you how we pull data in and out of that. That's our 4th takeaway. And finally, just some basic SharePoint views, how we can manipulate views, web parts. These are some things that are real low-hanging fruit that a lot of people don't realize are there, and it's really easy to do. So we're going to cover some of that. That's our 5th takeaway. So those are the 5 takeaways I hope you guys will leave this session with today. So real quick introduction to SharePoint, because I know this is SQL Saturday. I do a lot of talks at SharePoint Saturday, and when I try to introduce SharePoint there, they say, boo, hiss, move on, we know this. But for you guys that might not know SharePoint, this is the old school. This is from circa 2010. This is the wheel of functionality of SharePoint. So you've got things like you can create sites, websites, intranets, communities. You can do social sort of like Facebook type activities on SharePoint. You've got content management where you can things can get approved and published. You've got search. Way back in the day, in 2001 timeframe, I used to put SharePoint into people's enterprises because this was before Google, and SharePoint would just index their content and make it really searchable, and people loved that. What else? Insights. Business intelligence. There's some built-in tools in SharePoint for that. And finally, composites. That's a fancy way of saying no code, low code. How can I build a solution without actually writing any code? SharePoint makes that all easy. We're not going to talk about all this. I just want to make you aware, SharePoint is the Swiss Army knife. A lot of people kind of fear SharePoint. They hear bad things about it. SharePoint gets a lot of abuse. It gets used incorrectly. We're going to talk about that in a minute. So it's actually a really great tool, and learning how to move data in and out of it, I think, is a real powerful thing for a SQL developer or SQL admin to know how to do. You might hear about some tools that are out there for SharePoint. Visual Studio, hey, I need to deploy, I'm creating a web part, I'm creating a workflow and all that. A lot of times, I've been doing this for 30 years, I've been working with SharePoint since 2001. A lot of times, using Visual Studio to build a custom web part is overkill, and it's a sad truth. Most of the times, if I'm extending functionality in SharePoint, or I'm trying to get data out of SharePoint, I don't need to reach for this tool. This is like, having a bazooka when I'm just trying to, go fishing. It's too much. It's great, and I have used it, and there are certain cases where this is important, but don't think that Visual Studio for SharePoint is what you need to work with SharePoint. Another one, SharePoint Designer. This is billed as the no-code, low-code tool for SharePoint. So a lot of SharePoint admins or SharePoint, even developers, when I say SharePoint developer, I don't necessarily mean someone who writes code. There's a lot of people that develop solutions for SharePoint just by putting other things together and hooking them together. They might write a little HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but not necessarily C# or that kind of code. SharePoint Designer, again, it's one of these things where, well, it's been deprecated. Let's throw that out there. In 2013, that was the last version of SharePoint Designer. We're not getting one for 2016. We're not getting one for 2019. We're not getting one for online. So it's kind of already been, let's push it to the side. Even before it was deprecated, I didn't use it that much. I said to myself, I've got to be cloud ready. The solutions I write, whether I'm pulling data in and out, they got to work on premises, and they have to work on the cloud, because I know I'm going to go to the cloud eventually, even if it's just a hybrid move. Designer, it still has some benefits, especially if you're doing workflows, and there's got some of these other features that you see here. But again, not the tool that I go for. I use it less and less. So if you hear people saying, oh, you got to know SharePoint Designer, if you're working with SharePoint, not necessarily true. There's a lot of technologies out there to be learned in SharePoint. And again, this is one of those things where you hear all this and you start to get overwhelmed. And I have about 20 SharePoint developers that I support during my day job, and as I convert them to SharePoint developers, they get kind of overwhelmed. They hear about they have to learn REST APIs and the client object model, and in the data platform, the farms, the sites, list data, external list, server object model, link, language integrated queries. This is what you used to read in the docs. I tell them, look, when we're building solutions, we want to have cloud-friendly solutions. Really, these are the skills you want to learn. HTML5, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery, SPS Services Library from Mark Anderson. These are great tools. These are the ones I use 80% of the time when I'm doing development for SharePoint. These are the ones I reach for. Now, that said, Microsoft recognized that, and they've come out with a whole new SharePoint framework. I say new, it's been around for a couple of years now, but this is sort of the new way to build extensions and web parts and to talk to SharePoint. It's a whole new set of development tool chain. You can see at the top, this is sort of the old school. Back in 2001, .NET came out. I learned .NET, and there's NuGet, and Visual Studio, and C# and MS Build. And I spent a lot of time learning these tools. Well, Microsoft pulled the rug out from under me, and they said, hey, how about learning Node.js and NPM and Yeoman and TypeScript and Gulp and Webpack? And I was like, yay, because I love to learn new things. No, I do love to learn new things. It is a bit much. And a lot of people are sort of like, wow, that's a lot to learn. Fear not, what we're going to talk about has nothing to do with any of that. We're going to go with sort of basic out-of-the-box solutions. How can I move data in and out without having to learn a whole new tool stack? Sound good? All right. So let me talk about SharePoint a little bit. Number one, I kind of alluded to this already, developers try too hard. I don't know how many of my developers, and I was guilty of this at first too when I was a .NET developer, then I started learning SharePoint, is, hey, I need an approval workflow, or hey, I need this, I need to see the data a certain way, and I'd start whipping out Visual Studio. That was the tool I knew, that was my hammer, and I would start building solutions. And I would take 3 months to build something that took someone who had already been using SharePoint said, hey, Dave, I can do that in 5 minutes. So don't try too hard. A little sample, I like analogies. This analogy is here of, this is me and my toothpaste. I love the pollen on the toothpaste. I went to my dentist and my dentist said, oh, easy, Dave, you're wasting a lot of toothpaste. You just need that little bit. That's all, that's what's the most efficient. Don't too much, just use that little bit. Just like that, a SharePoint developer tries too hard. Here's an example in SharePoint of one of the developers trying too hard. You have a task list. SharePoint has a bunch of different out-of-the-box lists, contacts, tasks, calendar. If you have a task list, you might be asked to automatically send an email when someone gets assigned that task. Many developers say, oh, I can write some code. I'll use Designer and I'll do a workflow, or I'll use Visual Studio and I'll build something there. Hold your horses. You don't need all that. You can go into your task list settings, and under settings, under advanced settings, there's an option to say, hey, send an email when ownership is assigned. By default, it's no, but it takes me less than 5 minutes to say yes. Wow. So this is a real great example where I could have spent 5 minutes and just checked the box versus spending 3 months writing a bunch of code. What's another problem with SharePoint? Simple solutions exist. So my analogy here is, when I was mowing the lawn when I was a kid, I used a electric mower, push mower, and I would always push it too far and it would come out of the socket. I had an extension cord and it would come apart. And my dad took me up, he watched me do it for like an hour, and then he finally, knocked me on my head and said, listen, stupid, if you tie it in a knot, then you won't, when you pull it, it won't come unplugged. So you can still, because he liked the fact that I was out there working hard and trying to pull hard, trying to get that last bit of grass. But if I tied it like this, I no longer had that problem. That was a simple solution. I just didn't know it existed. Someone told me about it, my dad. And now, and I do this all the time, even if I don't need it, if I'm not going to yank, I still tie my extension cords in a knot. In SharePoint, here's an example of a simple solution that exists that not many people know about. The built-in approval workflow. Wait, what? And this is, by the way, SharePoint Online, this screenshot's from, so this is still accessible in SharePoint Online. In this example, the template is a 2010 template, but here's what's happened, real world example. I've been at work and a developer came to me and said, hey, I spent a couple of months, someone wanted to do an approval. They uploaded a document. It was maybe a PDF or form where it needed to be approved for, and they wanted an email to go out when it was uploaded so someone could approve it. And they wrote this, spent time writing a bunch of code. It's out of the box. You can go into settings again on a list and say, hey, I want to add a template that does approval. And it's just, a few clicks. You give it a name, you select the approval template. Now, some people have done this. I've given this talk before and people said, Dave, I went and looked, I didn't find it. You may have to activate the feature. So in SharePoint, in order for certain things to be available, like the 2010 approval workflow, you might have to go site settings, features, activate. So if you don't see this, that may be what your issue is. So don't go and look for it. Say it's not there, Dave, you lied to me. It is there. You just may need to activate the feature to make it happen. But again, one of these things that are there, and if you didn't know about it, you go off and you waste a lot of time trying to recreate the wheel. Here's a real fun one. Some features in SharePoint are hidden, and my favorite example of a hidden feature, and I did this, honest to God, real world, I used to pull out that Reynolds wrap and it would go flying, and the aluminum foil went all over the floor. I'd pick it up, I'd brush it off before the wife caught me, and I'd wipe it off and roll it back in, and it was all crumpled, so she'd eventually catch me, and I was like, oh my gosh. She said, listen, press the end, you can lock it. I'm like, no, what are you talking about? She's like, look at the end. It says, press here to lock. If you press that on your, and it's not just Reynolds, this is for some of the cheap stuff too. It keeps the roll in place. Oh, my mind was blown. When I do this talk in person, I have 3 or 4 people that I instantly say, Dave, this was worth the price of admission. Now, it was free, but this is one of those things that so many people don't realize, and I was one of those people. And in SharePoint, same kind of thing. My favorite hidden feature in SharePoint is the 3-state workflow. You might ask, what is that? I'm glad you asked. The 3-state workflow is on an issues list. So if you create an issues list and you stop there, you're half done. You didn't finish creating the issues list. There should be 2 steps, and it should be in the documentation, say, add an app, issues, and then second step, add a 3-state workflow. Because what the 3-state workflow does to the issues list is it says, hey, I'm going to send a notification. In this example, you can see I'm going into settings. I'm adding these 3-state workflow. I say on the status, when it starts it not started, and when it goes to in progress, send an email. If it goes from in progress to completed, send an email. This is a very much asked for feature. I've heard people complain about the issues list. They said the issues list is great, but I wish it would send me an email when one of the statuses change. I'm like, it can. It takes, just add a 3-state workflow. Oh my gosh. So another hidden feature that people just don't know about. And I blame this on the fact that we don't like to read the documentation. You know, we don't like to spend a lot of time in training. We want to get, I say we, like developers. I make all my SharePoint developers, all my .NET developers, when they first start working with SharePoint, I make them take the SharePoint users training. I want them to know how to use SharePoint. I want them to know about all these out-of-the-box features so that they're not wasting time doing development instead of actually using the features. This is just, you know, showing you some of the other settings. You can actually send an email message. You can say specifically who it's going to go to, or just whoever the task is assigned to. It's really all just click, 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 next. All right, final problem. Well, 2 more problems with SharePoint. They use it wrong. This one's my favorite because SharePoint gets a lot of hate and a lot of abuse, and it's just because people are using it wrong. My analogy here is this plunger, which I've been guilty of using in my toilet. So I've got a 20-year-old son, and he's prone to stopping up the toilet. I hit it with this plunger, no love. It's like, oh my God, and I blamed it on my son. You're terrible. I can't even fix it. My wife finally looked at what I was doing, and she said, no, silly, that's a toilet plunger. That's a sink plunger. Stop putting the sink plunger in the toilet. With a toilet plunger, works great. I actually got 2 of these. I hung them on my belt like I was a cowboy, and now I go around unclogging toilets with 1 push. So use the right tool for the right job. What's the analogy in SharePoint? Too many folders. I don't know how many times I've seen a SharePoint site that someone took a file share that had 1,000 folders in it, very deep, and just dumped it into SharePoint. Then when they start trying to use it in SharePoint, they go, this sucks. Yeah, because when you click through a folder structure in SharePoint and it takes 3 or 4 seconds for each page to load versus using File Explorer, it's going to be a drastically bad experience. You know, don't do that. Folders are okay. I hear a lot of times they say folders in SharePoint are bad. Folders in SharePoint are bad. They're not bad. Heck, Microsoft Teams, when you create a channel, guess how that gets implemented in SharePoint Online behind the scenes? Using a folder. But judiciously, use them sparingly, use them when needed, but don't go 10 levels deep with priority 1, priority 0, lives depend. You know, I've seen this. This is not a made up screenshot. Don't abuse them. If you use a tool wrong, people are going to hate the tool. And I just wrap this up. SharePoint has a ton of out-of-the-box features, and you should learn what they are, learn how to use them, and it'll make your life so much easier. All right, so let's talk about some of those features. SharePoint views, number 1. There's default views. You can create custom views. You can have your own personal views. You can have public views. Why are SharePoint views important to a SQL professional? Because I've been asked this question where I've had a list in SharePoint, in this example, the products that are in production. And someone said to me, Dave, I need you to grab this data, stick it in SQL, and then give me I need to see a group by query of each product by category. And I said, wait a minute, you want me to build an SSIS transform and you want me to drag it into SQL? Also, you can see group the product by category. They're like, yes. I'm like, well, stop telling me how to do my job. If you just need to see product by category, I can create my own view. So I go into SharePoint and I click new view, and there is a group by, the SQL folks, we know group by. I can say group by, in this case, classification. And then look at that. Now I know I have 30 air conditioners, 24 camcorders, that simple. I didn't have to go spend a line to, I want to, I love SSIS, so I want to jump in there but I don't want to do it unnecessarily. And so using views, you can do all sorts of, grouping by and manipulating the data right inside of SharePoint. And there it is, there it's available to them. I told the person that asked for it says, refresh the page, there you go. I made this the default view. You can do personal views. Personal views are only available to you. So it's kind of like having development. I can mess around with the view when it's personal and no one else is going to see it in case I don't know what I'm doing. A public view, everyone gets to see, and you can even make it a default view so that all they have to do is hit refresh and then they'll see the view that you created for them. So a real great tip. If you need to do some sort of lightweight data grouping or sorting or something like that, manipulating a SharePoint view is one way to do that. I kind of walk through the screens there, but let me show you a real world example. So let me jump out to my demo. So what I have here, just as by way of introduction, I'm in my portal at azure.com. For those of you who are not familiar with Azure, this is Microsoft Azure's portal, and I have a bunch of virtual machines. What I did, Microsoft has a wizard that you can step through. It takes about 8 clicks to create a SharePoint farm, and on-premises farm that's hosted in the cloud. And that's what you see here. This is my SQL server that SharePoint requires. This is the web front end, and there's actually an additional Active Directory. It's the minimum of 3 servers that the wizard creates for me. What's great about this is I can use my MSDN. I'm a developer. I get MSDN credits. I get $150 in credit every month from my company. A lot of companies have those credits and don't even know it. Every company I've worked for, a lot of companies over 30 years, and at least 8 different times when I went to a company and asked for an MSDN, they had them, but they didn't know it. And I ended up being in charge of the program. I'm in charge of the current program at DSA, the Microsoft program, because I asked about an MSDN. So if you think your company is big enough and might have MSDN subscriptions, whether it's because they're a partner or maybe they have software assurance because a lot of times they're included with that, you should ask, because you never know. A lot of times they're not unused, they're unassigned. And so with my MSDN subscription, I'm able to create all these virtual machines. Now back to my dashboard. I started up my SharePoint farm so I can click on any of the machines and start them. It's like an Uber. When I start my machine, it starts using my credits. When I'm done using them, I have these all set to turn off automatically in the evening because these are just development, they're not production, but I could also stop them. So now that these are running, all I have to do is connect using, however method I use, remote desktop. And then from there, I just use remote desktop. Do have to use the public IP address, not the local one, and then it opens up a remote desktop file. Once I do that, I log in, and bam, now I'm into my remote SharePoint farm. I'm actually logged into my SQL box, and you can see what I have here. This is SSDT, SQL Server Data Tools. It's Visual Studio version that's used for SSIS, and I've got my integration project. Now, I'm going to come back to this in a second, jumping ahead a little bit there. Let me show you just views in SharePoint. So here is the SharePoint that I'm hosting in my Azure. And this is the product categories that I was showing you earlier. Now, again, if someone wants to see this grouped, all I have to do is come into the list settings, say create a view, pick a view that I want to start with. Maybe I've already got one I'm working with. Maybe I want to start fresh. I'll start with one I'm already using. And then from there, we'll call this grouped by category. Scroll down. What am I showing? I'm already showing title, color. I keep saying category, but I think that was classification, right? Actually, let's do this one by color. I don't see category. This must be a different demo I did. I don't have color. I don't have category, but let's do by color. So we'll group by color. And then down here in the group by, you can see I can do sorting. I'll sort by whatever, whatever column I want to sort by. I can sort by what I'm grouping by if I want to. And then down, I can filter if maybe there's an active field. I don't want to show the ones that are not active, but if I want to group them, oh, here's totals too, right? If I want to see the total amount, I can do counts and things like that. And here's also where I mentioned where I can do a personal view or a public view. And now you can't make a personal view default, but if it's a public view, I could also make it the default. So as soon as anyone hits this list, my view would be the one they would see. And let's see, where's my, I'm looking for my group by, and I think maybe what I did on this particular list is I probably included a column that's not allowed to be grouped by. So that's good. I'm glad this happened. There are some times where if a certain list has multi-value columns, then you're not going to be able to group by, and it looks like that's what happened with this one. But you get the idea. I just want to show you behind the scenes. Most default, the task list, the issues list, contact list, you can group by just fine. This one, I did some funky import, and I think I might have included a multi-value column, which is why the group by is not showing. All right, let's jump back. I want to get to the SSIS. So again, work smarter, not harder. Any questions? I heard.
Yeah, I was just about to interrupt you. Sorry.
Yeah,
There are a couple of questions, PowerPoint specific, so I wanted to do those if you don't mind, real quick.
yeah, shoot.
It says, are these features available on the PowerPoint, SharePoint online version? And
Yes,
yes. Same person, follow-up question. On-prem feature or older version allows me to send an email to be added to a list or a calendar. When will that feature be available in a SharePoint Online version? So essentially making a list email enabled.
great question. So I'll start with the first one. Again, just about every feature I show you has been around since SharePoint 2007. I've been using SharePoint since 2001. I did take a break during 2003. Let's be honest, 2003 was horrible. 2007 it got much better. And what's surprising is how many features. Sometimes I'll talk about one of these hidden features, and someone will say, "Oh, is that new in 2013? Is that new in 2016?" And I'll be like, "No, it's been around since 2007." It's just one of those things where if you don't investigate, if you don't do a deep dive, you don't read the manual, you'd be surprised how many features have been around for, since 2007. And then the other question was, emailed enabled lists. So 2007, you could set a list to be emailed enabled. Honestly, I can't remember if I've turned this on in one line. I thought you could, but it sounds like the person asking the question saying it might not be there. I'm gonna take that one offline. So do me a favor, tweet me, shoot me an email, and we'll follow up on that. I will say this about email enabled lists. Where I work at the DoD, Department of Defense, Army, we're very security conscious. So we have disabled that feature, even on premises where it should work, because you don't want just anyone filling your list with data. In theory, if you email enable a list, they could do a DoD attack, right? Denial of service, DOS attack, denial of service, and flood your system full of data. So that's why a lot of people. Oh, thanks, Siri. I appreciate you trying to help. Siri just jumped in. We were talking earlier about Alexa trying to help out. Now Siri's trying to help out. Yeah, so a lot of people, I wouldn't be surprised if your tenant has that turned off. I wasn't aware that it was turned off, just completely not available. It may be a situation where that was just turned off for security purposes, as it is in mine. We turn that off everywhere we can just because of the security aspect. So great question. All right, let's push forward. How are we doing on time? All right. Let's talk about SQL Server integration services and SharePoint. As I mentioned, there are open source destination credentials. There's two different versions of this adapter that you can download and install, and they make reading data from SharePoint into SQL very easy. So here's an example of SSDT, and what you don't see here is if I zoom in here, you don't see SP cred. There's no credential for SharePoint. You don't see any SharePoint source or destination. That's because out of the box, they're not there. What? Come on, SQL. I thought you were friends with SharePoint. No default source or destination for SharePoint out of the box. But we're in luck. Codeplex has it. Wait, no, Codeplex has been deprecated. Okay, GitHub has it. I have a link embedded in this slide. So if you click on this slide, when I put them up later, you will go to this page because this is hard to find. Every time I do this, I have to verify that's still out there, that's still in the same place. So don't Bing it. Don't do a hard target search for it. You may not find the right one. I have the link here in this slide, and again, it'll be available. This will take you to a download of the SharePoint list adapter, and when you download and install that, you will get this. You'll get a credential that is now available that allows you to configure a connection manager for SharePoint connections. You'll also get here on the toolbox a destination and a source that is specific and smart and knows about SharePoint. So when you go and here's me configuring the connection manager against the SharePoint credential. When you set it up, what does it need? It needs to know what the site is that you're going to access in SharePoint, what the list name is. And no, this is not a mistake. You do have to include the display name of the list name. So all space items is correct. If you make a mistake, like I did the first time I did this, and don't include a space, it will holler. You'll get some, and it won't tell you, oh, you've got the name wrong. It says some weird error message like, null value or something, and you're just like, wait, what? So be aware, do have to do the display name of the view, and you have to get the site URL correct when you set up the credential. And then it'll prompt you for the, a username and password, and then save that if you let it save that. Then you can use it like you do any other destination in SSIS. So here I've set up an OLDB source pointing at SQL Server, and I'm sucking some data out of SQL Server and pushing it and writing it to the SharePoint list destination. It looks like I grabbed a list of products from AdventureWorks, the 2014 version, and I stuck it into a SharePoint list. So yeah, here's an example where I actually connected to my SQL Server box, and I showed you the data that was coming out of SQL. Looks like I'm grabbing all the data from the new products table. Then it ends up in SharePoint. Let me show you that. Let's go switch out to my my Azure machine so we can show you this real live. So in this example, we've got production products by category in SharePoint. Let's stop editing that for a minute. So I did it already, so you sort of see the results already. But let's see if we can do it again. I'm going to go back here to my, if it lets me go back, all items, or not all items, but an overview. SharePoint has a view that shows you all your lists and a summary of the number of items in that list. Let's see if we can do that. Oh, it's way back. Site contents, that's what I'm looking for. So site contents shows you all the lists on your site. This is my project status site. This is running on my on-premises SharePoint that's hosted in Azure. And then when this guy finally loads, let's do it again. It's not the fastest beast. You can see that so far I've got 1,008 items in my product category table. So let's see if we can increase that. We're going to grab some more products from SQL and stick them in here. So we'll go to our integration services, and it looks like it might be stuck. So let me close. Yeah, Visual Studio is busy. It figures I've ran this 4 or 5 times to make sure it works. And of course, the one time I want to actually show it to you, it's going to sit here and hang up. So let's see if we can just kill it and restart it. Yes, no, maybe. Okay. Well, if I were to run it, you would see, like you saw on the slides, that it pulls the data from the source and pushes it to SharePoint. All again because it has. I installed that tool. Let's see if I can show you the tool that allowed me to have those source and destinations. So if I go to my downloads, I'll show you. Now, here they are. This is the list adapter setup that I was able to download from GitHub. Guess what? There's also one for SharePoint Online. Let me talk a little bit about that one. And all I do, again, you just download it, you double click it, you run an install. I don't even think I had to reboot. And then also, I did have to restart my SQL Server developer tool, my Visual Studio, for it to realize that they were there. But yeah, it's a real quick, real simple install, nothing real crazy. Once you install it, you restart Visual Studio and bam, they show up in the toolbox. So there also is an online version because everyone's in the cloud now, and people said, "Hey, Dave, what you showed me worked, but it didn't work. I tried it against my my Office 365 SharePoint, and it didn't work." You need a slightly different version for online. So we did have it out there under the Office Development Center under samples. It was called SSIS SharePoint Online Adapters. It was great. Right before I did this talk, I clicked on this link to make sure it worked, and guess what? Microsoft took it down. Thanks, Microsoft. That said, I had already downloaded it. So I have this for you, and I'm going to make this available at my website at madsharepoint.com. I will take the, it's open source, MIT license. So I'll take this SharePoint Online. This is it right here. I'll take that and I'll post that up there so you guys can still have it. And again, if we, if I ran through the install, it's actually the same. I think they started with the same base source code. Someone just took this and tweaked it so it works online. And I've used it online. It works really great. So what else? Let's go here. So okay, great. SharePoint list adapter for moving data out of SharePoint into SQL. It's great when you need it, right? So if someone says to me, "Hey, Dave, I need a scheduled task we're pulling data out of SharePoint and we're archiving it, and then we want to delete it from, this is a real world example where we want to get out of it. And SharePoint has this issue with 5,000 rows. Once you get above 5,000 rows on a list, it gets really slow. So what we did is we started archiving data out of SharePoint, put it into a SQL Server data warehouse where we could then properly, do historical business intelligence and things like that. So that was a good example for where really using, I wanted a scheduled task and I set up SSIS against SharePoint to pull it at, weekly intervals. But you don't always need that, that level of integration. If you just want to pull data into Excel to make a pretty chart, Excel does that for you automatically. SharePoint does for you automatically. Let's take a look at that real quick. So I can go to a list and say, hey, this is the one we did earlier where we wanted to see it grouped by. Now I want to pull it out into Excel so I can do a pivot chart and do all sorts of cool, visualizations. Guess what? There's a button up in the ribbon that says export to Excel. I don't know how many people don't know this. It drives me nuts. You click on that, and even if you're in like Chrome, it'll warn you, oh, if you got to have the right application, but just ignore that and keep going. I've had people send me that message say it doesn't work. Yes, it does. It gives you this weird, saved OSS server query. So you open that and bam, it makes a connection. It pulls your data, drops it in Excel, and it maintains not a live connection, but it maintains a connection so that if the data changes and I want to see a refresh data, I can just click on data refresh and it will requery SharePoint and pull down the latest and greatest data. Actually, you could, and if you just want a snapshot, you can go and you've got the data, you can copy and put it somewhere else. But if you want live, fresh data, you can even set to say automatically refresh every time I open the Excel workbook, which is cool when someone says, hey, I want to open it and I just want the latest and greatest data. So again, it's like a 5-minute setup. Once you get the data in Excel, it's really easy to say, hey, show me insert a recommended chart. And now I've got, it looks like I got 13 DVD players and 12. I got a little pie chart, though I did go to a visualization class a couple of SQL Saturdays ago. I should mention this. And a visualization guru told me never do pie charts. He said they're horrible. You really can't tell. It's hard to compare the different slices. And I was really disappointed because they're colorful. And he admitted, he's like, people love the color. I'm like, yeah, the color. He's like, yeah, but you should look at some of them other visualizations. So that's on my to-do list for 2020 is to come up with better visualizations. I still like the pie chart though. But yeah, that easy. Pull the data, insert recommended chart. In this case, I picked pie chart. Bam, now I've got a little chart I can put into a report for my CIO. I want to talk a little bit about the connection properties. If you click under connections, and you'll see that when you open that file, it stored the connection string. A lot of good information there. You'll see the view GUID. This is the global unique identifier for the view. You'll see the list name GUID. You'll see this information will come in handy if you ever want to do something advanced with these lists, and we'll talk about that in a second. Now I just kind of zoomed in on. So this is what you're looking at. This is in that connection. You have the name of your site. You've got the list GUID, the view GUID, and then the source. Hold that thought. Last tool I want to talk about is Access. Microsoft Access is super powerful. I mentioned in the beginning, great tool for working with SharePoint. I feel like the Access guys have been fighting for their lives for years. Microsoft has this thing called co-opetition where different the Access guys will compete with the SQL guys, will compete with the Power BI guys, and it all makes them better at the end of the day. Well, I feel like the Access guys are doing a bang up job because they do all these web service calls behind the scenes just by using the GUI that's in Access. You can link to SharePoint tables, you can query those tables, you can update those tables. So here's Access, here's me creating a new file. Now be careful, when you create, if you think Access in SharePoint, a lot of people think I got to go create a custom web app. This used to be known as the SharePoint app and all that. And that had some cool features, but it also manipulated SQL Server directly, which was not cool from a security standpoint. So don't do this. This is not what you want. We're going to talk about just a regular old blank desktop database. So when you create one of those, then from there, you can go get external data. Now, I know all the rage nowadays is Power BI and Power Query, or in Office 2016, 2019, they call it Get and Transform. But man, Access was doing this back in the day, where you could go and you could connect to a SharePoint list, just like I did here. I go to external data and say SharePoint list. I tell it the site that I want to connect to, and you can put a bunch. You can just copy and paste whatever site you're on, and it'll ignore any extra. This is not this is not as persnickety as the thing that we were working with earlier, where you had to get the space right. This one's pretty good about ignoring extra data. So I put in here an internet site I was playing with, and then it provides a list of all the SharePoint lists, and it represents them as access linked tables like relational tables. Now, what's cool is not only does it show you all the regular lists like products and you know, style library and documents, it also shows you hidden lists. So a lot of times people are like, hey Dave, I know there's a workflows task list, but I can't find it. The Access lays it bare. There's a taxonomy hidden list where if you're using managed metadata, Access lays it bare. There's a user info list that's hidden that stores all the people that are on my website. Access makes it so easy, available, and easy to query. I mean, right there, this is worth the price of admission, having, you know, access to these hidden lists very easily. Once you connect to those lists, and it's smart enough that if my list, in this case, if my products list is using managed metadata, Access will automatically, if I just say connect to products, it'll automatically bring in the related lists like taxonomy, because this is using managed metadata, or in this case, user info, because the product list contains the created by and the modified by, which are people lists. So we need to know, you know, who those people are. So again, real powerful. Access is smart. It has a lot of smarts about SharePoint. On this example, I'm just pulling up the products table, and I'm showing you, look, you want to write an update query? You want to write your own SQL? I'm a big fan of handwriting my SQL. So Access has a bunch of GUI that you can use to design the SQL statement using a graphical user interface, but you can just switch to SQL view and write your update statement like you're used to. It's got some, you know, it's not T-SQL, it's Access SQL. So if I'm using a like statement, I'm not using a percent sign, I'm using an asterisk. Those kind of things threw me for, you know, I was an old SQL guy and I start using Access. Watch out for the slight changes in the dialect. But other than that, in this example, what am I doing? I'm doing an update. Now here, let me explain this example a little bit. Someone came up to me and said, Dave, and I work for the government. They said, Dave, we need you to update everyone's title. You know, Mary was working on 50 items in this list that's, you know, 3,000 long, and we just need to pull the ones that she was working on and make some updates. And without running a query against it like I'm doing here, people would hand jam it. They would go in, they would do a view, they might do 50 at a time. Usually views are only showing you so many at a time. Access makes this super powerful. I can go in here and I can update, you know, just by using a where clause in my update, and I can target a certain portion of a list and make updates. And that's what I'm doing here. So I only want all the titles that start with SV, and I'm going to spell that out to super value. It even wraps it in a pseudo transaction. So it says here, you're about to update those 50. If I expected 500 to be updated, or if I expected 2 to be updated, and this was not what I want, I'd say no, and it would roll this back. If it is indeed what I want, I'll say yes, and Access will commit this transaction to SharePoint. And that's what you see here. It looks like I did it a couple of times. That's why it's super value. I did it a couple of times. I mean, just this, you know, sometimes I feel bad giving away this secret because people are going to realize I'm not doing all this special stuff. People have asked me to do this, and I'll say it's going to take a week when it only takes me 5 minutes. It's really, really powerful. All right, last thing I want to talk about is surveys. I had a requirement where someone said, Dave, I did a survey in SharePoint. I need that data pulled out. Can you pull it out and stick it somewhere else, stick it in SQL? And I said, oh, I think so. And I tried to do it initially. If I back up, I'll show you. When I connect to Access and looked at my list, I did have some surveys, but they're not shown. Out of the box, using Access, it will not connect to a survey. And the reason it doesn't is surveys have a couple of special fields that Access doesn't know how to handle. So the guys behind Access said, you know what, this just not support surveys out of the box because it's a little bit difficult. So if you go and you search that out on the internet, you'll find answers like this one. You cannot import surveys or discussions. And you might stop there and say it can't be done. I don't like that answer. I don't like to hear that something can't be done. So I did some more search. Look, this guy says, you can do this. This is actually the same article right above it. It said you can't be done, and some guy posted, yes, you can. And he details how to do it. Basically, what he does is he creates a little visual basic for applications, a little VBA. He uses the do transfer SharePoint list function, which I didn't know about. And he says, but in order to do this, you need to know some secrets. You need to know the view GUID, the list GUID, If only I had this information somewhere. Gosh, I wish I had this information. Wait. If I go back to my Excel example, that's what they were giving me, right? So if I connect via Excel and go into the connection properties, that's everything I need to then bring a survey in. So using this information, I can then go to Access and pull in surveys. So let me show you what I did right there if I can. Jump back into my farm table, my farm server, and I don't have I have that local. So let's bring up my Access here. So here's my Access, and if I do an Alt F11 to bring up the VBA code, you can see it's not hard at all. I just did a transfer list. I specified I'm going to link, not import, because you can link or import. I gave it the name of the site I wanted to attack or pull data in, and then I gave it that list GUIDs and the view GUID, and I got that all from when I connected via Excel. Once I run this command, let's do a Control G, so I can just run a command here. It's going to create that. It just ran it. It was that fast. If I go out to I should now have a lunch. Look at that. I did this a couple times. So there's the first time I did it. This is the second time I did it. This is the one I just did here. That's the survey. I had a lunch survey on SharePoint, and it looks like 2 people filled it out. And they were, what are we having for lunch? If I want to see that survey, I can right-click on this link table and say More Options, open the default view, and that will open it up. I can't remember if I did this from a SharePoint Online list or from a SharePoint On-Premises list. I know I've done it both in the past, so this works no matter if you're online or on-premises. But that's how simple it is to pull data from a survey. So never fear if someone says it can't be done. Usually, if you persevere hard enough, you'll find a solution. All right. One thing I mentioned is using SharePoint Online and using SharePoint On-Premises. I mentioned starting with Azure and maybe getting some credits. You can also do an Azure trial to get some credits, but it's really simple to get started with SharePoint Online. There's an Office 365 developer program you can join for free, no credit card. You get an Office 365 tenant that you're the global admin of, and it comes with 5 licensed users. You get it for 90 days. As long as you're still using it, Microsoft will automatically renew you. I've had one for over 7 years. So this is a huge freebie. Go out, sign up for the Office. You do not have to write code for this. This is for a SharePoint person who's developing solutions. I find this, or even if you're a SQL person who just needs to play around with SharePoint Online, you want to try some of the things. I know we had a question before about does something work on SharePoint Online. The best way to find out if something works or not, try it yourself. Sign up for a free your free own tenant, and you can try anything. It's really cool. I highly recommend it. And again, there's a link in my slides, so if you download slides later and click on this, it'll take you right to that program to sign up. That's all I have for you guys. Hopefully you got a few nuggets out of this. I really appreciate you spending time hanging out, beating on SharePoint with me, looking at a little SSIS. There's my Twitter handle. So I'm David E. Patrick at Twitter. Feel free to tweet me questions. Feel free to tweet me, comments. Check out my Mad SharePoint site. There's a URL, plugging my job again. I really appreciate it. Do we have any questions out there in the chat? I'll open it up again.
Yes, we do. So I have a question here from Lily. What is the best way to download documents from SharePoint?
Great question. Great question. There's a couple of ways, and it's hard to say best because it depends on your context. But one thing I'll do is I will map a drive to a SharePoint document library, and that way it looks like a file explorer. It looks like like a T drive or an X drive or something like that, and you can just drag and drop. That's one quick, easy way. That's kind of an old school way. I've been doing that since 2007. If you're online, I know there's some newer user interface features where you can highlight everything and click download, and it'll zip it up and download for you automatically. But if you're using some of the older versions, you can always map a drive to it and then just drag and drop. So that gives you that really cool sort of file explorer experience, but using it against SharePoint. Any other questions?
That was the only, I think, question that we had. This was great. I really appreciate all the information. I've never heard about the 365 developers, so actually I'm going to try it out after this and see how it goes. Yeah, so thank you very much. This was great.
Awesome, great. Thanks everyone. I hope, like I said, hope you got something out of it. If not the developer thing, at least you got the Reynolds wrap thing, so you won't be spilling your Reynolds wrap on the floor anymore. Again, feel free to hit me up on twitter.com, David E. Patrick. Thanks.
Thank you, David, very much.